Hello and welcome to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy. And our guest today, really excited to talk with him. He's a member of the Genesis Mastermind program, but more importantly, he can't sleep the first night in a hotel room, turns out. He's a solid Chuck Norris fan. And he also, on top of it, happens to be one of the owners of Scott Vickner down in New Orleans, Louisiana. He's my friend, Brad Scott. Brad, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Charlie. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. How about yourself?
We're having one of those rare days in South Louisiana where it's the beginning of April and it was in the 40s this morning. So we had a blizzard earlier this year and now we're having colder weather. I think we're in for a seasonal change, hopefully.
Honestly, I've been telling myself and everyone who's at school pickup, we've been telling ourselves that story day after day after day. And the whiplash, Brad, I can't deal with it.
Well, I put away all the long sleeve shirts and stuff, and I had to actually pull this one out this morning because it was chilly.
Yeah. I had to bust out the winter coat this morning. It's literally freezing temperatures. Probably should have retaken care of the pipes and everything, but we won't go into my $19,000 worth of water problems that have occurred at my house.
We talked about that last time at the meeting. It was very fascinating, actually.
So, Brad, you get to answer ye age-old question. What's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
There's a lot of things they don't teach us in law school, but there's one thing I feel that most lawyers are completely allergic to. They kind of break out in hives when they get close to it. Math. They don't teach us math. And what I mean by that is, it's the importance of numbers and data and making data-driven decisions. It's amazing. Lawyers are really good at math. They're human calculators. When you ask them to take any big number and divide by 3, they can do that. When it comes to what was your profit margin, how many leads, what's your conversion rate, those kinds of things, their eyes glaze over. They don't know what to do with that kind of stuff. And, we live in a world that is completely surrounded in math. Everything runs by numbers. So the thing they don't teach us in law school is math. We're going to dig into that.
So that sounds like there's a journey behind that for Brad. What is your journey with math?
Well, the way I look at it is this. I think by definition, lawyers aren't good with numbers because what happens is all those smart kids in school who are good with numbers, they're too bright to go to law school. They end up becoming engineers, they become scientists, they go into tech, and then the leftover kind of bright kids end up in law school who have number aversion. So I think as a grouping, we avoid math kind of thing. I was one of those kids who was good with numbers. My undergraduate's in corporate finance and economics. And actually, I have a physics teacher from high school, Miss Punch, if she's out there listening for any reason. And I was supposed to be her engineer. And when I used to see her, she had a seafood place. And she's like, "What happened to you? Why did you go to law school? What were you thinking?" kind of thing. So I always had an inclination towards math. My dad was a contractor. I learned trigonometry with a framing square. I don't know how many people in the audience know what a framing square is, but it's an amazing calculation device. So I always liked math. And just so happens I went to law school. So hindsight's 2020, as they say. But it's one of those things, and it's so important. And I have lots of friends who are lawyers. I'm always talking to them about their business, and it's amazing how many times I start asking them questions about how the inner workings of their finances are, or things like that, and they just don't want to talk about it. I don't know if they just want to ignore the numbers because they don't want to face them, but they just don't speak numbers. And I think it's one of those things that if you do speak numbers and you start really digging into the data, you're going to make much better decisions. Your law firm is going to thrive. You're going to succeed a lot better. We're just in a series of science experiments, basically, as lawyers who run and operate a law firm. We're trying things. And you have to observe. You have to draw hypotheses. You have to try to design the experiment. And what our gut says is right is 99% wrong. We don't know crap, especially in front of juries. So you have to test things. And the only way you know if you're getting it right is you have to have some data. And you analyze your data, and then you A/B test things. And the faster you can iterate, the more experiments you can conduct, the faster you're going to go, the bigger you're going to grow. It all starts with numbers, though.
Oh my gosh, it just takes everyone back to middle school, whatever, whichever science class they were teaching for you back then.
Scientific method, it works. Imagine that.
If then. Everything's an if then statement. If I do this, then blank will happen in my firm. If I crank up marketing by 5% on my budget, then I should expect an additional $100,000 in revenue by end of year. It's all if then statements when you're testing this stuff.
Yes. Absolutely. And for some reason, lawyers think their business model is immune to numbers.
Hmm.
I don't know why we think that, but at the end of the day, we're businesses, just like anything else.
Which is funny because you mentioned like the whole cutting things by a third. You could do that math. Hourly billing is very prominent, and there's so many fundamental calculations, financial calculations that go into it, but it's a lack of complete picture. It's like I know my one number. I know that my case that I'm working on right now should be worth roughly blank to me. I know that if I bill an hour, it's worth this much. But made of less consequences, what happens when we start adding in all of the other factors, like if I hire someone, or I'm starting to purchase a lot of excess software, or if I'm spending my hour, this is the classic one, doing my hourly billing work,
Mhm.
then what am I not doing that hour that might actually be a multiple of that?
Absolutely. Leverage. All we're looking for is levers that we can pull to get a 3 or 4 or 5 or 10x impact on what we're putting into the system. And I think a lot of it's more of a systems modeling type of mindset that many lawyers don't have. And when you think of your firm, it's very abstract. We're selling
Mm.
intellectual type thoughts and we're solving problems for people. But at the end of the day, we still have a business. And there's a
Yeah.
model. It's almost a conveyor model. We talked about this at some of our meetings. And the way I view it is there's really kind of three columns, the three
Mm.
processes we have. We have marketing in that first box. Then we have our sales or our intake in that kind of that second middle box. Then we have our production, which is our revenue
Yep.
generation model on the other end. And each one of these little pillars in our law firm and our process has inputs and outputs. We
Yes.
spend marketing dollars or we put in time on networking and stuff like that. That goes into the top of the marketing column. And then what
Hmm.
comes out of marketing is leads. So we should have numbers. How much are we spending? How many leads are we getting? Basic KPIs that you can start looking at for marketing. Then the leads just jump up to the top of the sales pipeline, and leads
Yep.
go in, signed cases come out. Okay, now look at some ratios. How many leads went in? How many wanted leads came out? What are our numbers there? Then you take those signed cases and you dump them into the third column, the production, and revenue comes out. So essentially, you can boil down the entire business model for law is we put marketing dollars in and we get revenue out the back end. And the math in between there and how you get there is how well your firm is going to work and function. And our job as operators is to optimize those numbers. Do the
Yeah.
what if, do the experiments. How do I get this number to work better? And if something is not working well, or you have a KPI is off, the question then becomes, is this a people problem or is it a process problem? And what are
That's
our
right.
hypotheses? How do we fix these things? And just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. My people in my office, they hate me because things are always changing. I'm always getting a brand new idea. They get that email, good morning, team. It's Monday morning. Like, nope. What are we moving this week? What are we going to change? Because it's always tweaking. My wife
Yeah.
told me a couple of weeks ago, we're sitting at an airport waiting for a layover, and I'm the guy who can't sit still. I probably
Mm.
OCD and all that stuff that when we were kids. I can't just sit there waiting for the flight. I'm walking the
Yeah.
whole airport. I'm getting my steps in. And she made an observation of me. She goes, you know what? You're really uncomfortable being comfortable. And I'm like, you know what? I never thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. I like change. I like to optimize. I don't like sitting
Yeah.
still. So, yes, lawyers need to know their numbers. It should be
Yep.
etched into a stone tablet and hung in every law firm. Know thy numbers. And then it should be an element saying, thou shalt not make decisions without data. Those are like the two
Yeah.
commandments of running a law firm.
What I find so helpful and interesting, though, is the way that you described it, Brad. You have these three columns, and it's sort of you have this master system right there that oversees the whole firm. And too often, when I encounter firm owners who are starting to talk numbers, they seem to start from a really complex number. Like I'm trying to figure out my exact ratio of organic leads by source model against who did intake and time of consult producing X revenue. I'm like, I mean, if you know that,
That's great.
okay.
But let's get the big numbers first.
Like how many leads? How many did you sign? What was the average value? How quickly did you get those leads taken care of, depending on practice area?
Speed to lead,
And
things
what was the
like that.
financial outcome?
Yeah, and
It's
you start with those big numbers, those big KPIs.
Yeah.
How many leads? How many signups? Percentage wanted, revenue per case. And as you start digging into this stuff and you start trying to solve these problems, you're going to start slicing and dicing the data in more detailed ways. That's just the nature of the beast. but get
Yeah.
a handle on those basic ones. If you don't know those numbers, you don't know what your business is doing, and you're flying blind.
That's right.
Absolutely. One of my favorite movies is Moneyball. I don't know if you ever watched.
Oh, I truly,
So I'm a
absolute
baseball guy.
favorite.
You can
One of the
see Ted
best movies.
DiMaggio behind me. I love baseball. I love numbers. So
There
Moneyball
you
is
go.
like my ultimate movie. But
Oh yeah.
those people have never watched it. It's the 2002 Oakland Athletics. Money was an issue for them. They had a very small budget compared to other teams. They lost a bunch of talent and had to figure out how to win in really an unfair environment money wise. And lawyers
Yep.
were the same way. We're not the big fish probably in the pond most of the times. We have to compete with bigger guys.
Yep.
Data and numbers is the way you do that. You're leaner, you're meaner, you're quicker on your feet. You can pivot better. But Moneyball, they developed that what was called sabermetrics, and they
Yep.
used data to get to wins. They calculated that. So it changes everything. You can put a man on the moon doing math. You can run a baseball team with math. You go on a diet. What are you doing? It's math, calories,
Yes.
macros, protein. You get in your car, radio stations, math, the speedometer's math. We live in a world of numbers. Our law
Yep.
firm is no different. You have to know your numbers.
Yeah, there's a reason math is called the universal language, right? Everyone has to recognize and bend to the will of math overall. Did you ever have a point in running the law firm where you completely ignored the math and then had a wake up call about
Absolutely. All the time.
Yeah.
I keep getting a refresher on that constantly.
it?
It's usually at the end of the year when we look at the financials, it's like, wait a minute, what did I not pay attention to this year? Or I lost track of a number. Or,
Right.
and really, I think the difficulty a lot of lawyers have, it's not that we don't know these things. We know the numbers are important, but a lot of times our data is just hidden. We have our tech silo looks really bad from a business. We have one program for case management. We have another program sometimes for lead management. We have our financial data in QuickBooks somewhere else. We have all these disjointed kind of connected data things. So one of the first things a lawyer is a practitioner who's running a business, one thing you got to do is really you got to hone in and start collecting the data. That's the
Right.
very first step. Find a way to pull all the data into one place. We did a thing last year where we went into Power BI. You and I had talked about a little bit about that
Yes.
before. But the challenge is to harness all that data coming from different systems and get them into
Yeah.
one place. And then once you have them in one place, you can kind of start modeling the data. You can start analyzing the data. Then you can start making decisions on the data. But until you have the data, you can't do anything. Most lawyers, if you ask them, it's rare they run a P&L. They something as basic as that from a business standpoint. And you ask them what they did last quarter, they have no idea. So it's a little effort, just a little effort of numbers. Just try. It would make such a big difference.
There was a client who I worked with for a short period of time, and he had an estate planning firm, and he really was the estate planning wing of a slightly larger firm that I think had 3 total practice groups. And he was in his 50s, had owned the firm or been one of the partners for 20 years plus. It was the first time he had ever sat down with his actual P&L to do a real dive on it. Because at the end of the year, it was the classic, how much money, basically taxes. Like, okay, I'm looking at how much I owe on taxes based on how much money I took out of this thing. And otherwise, I don't know, that number looks good, so I guess I'm happy.
Yeah. Sometimes their KPI is basically what's the balance in the checking account. And
Yes.
that's how a lot of lawyers work their business. Is it going up? Is it going down? But you can't plan for that. You don't know what's going to happen with that. And it's hard to scale and grow without a command of your numbers.
So I'm curious with the numbers thing, what this usually gets back to is the idea of a budget, which tends to freak people out because, and obviously your partner David with the PI side, that's an area where the idea of a budget can panic folks. Although once they realize I have an inventory, which means I have money that I can bring in coming forward, as opposed to the inverse where you might be charging up front. So it's like, we have to generate this level of sales repeatedly to do it. What was the breakthrough for you on budget?
Well, I'll tell you, like we got involved with Fireproof, Mike Morrison, and everything else. And it's amazing. And last year, you would think that personal injury would be a lot harder to predict number wise because, case value and stuff like that. I think David last year got ridiculously close to his actual budget number of like less than like 0.1%, which is the same thing that Fireproof teaches and stuff like that. The idea is that when you start looking at things on an average and you start dealing with bigger numbers become a lot more predictable. And
That's key.
That is the thing. So, and actually it's harder for me on my side to get closer to budget numbers because we have a lot more variability to our business than he does.
Right.
A lot more seasonality to it for some reason. But yeah, looking at numbers and making decisions on numbers, it's something I've kind of done from the beginning. Funny
Right.
story, David's my law partner. The way the partnership basically started and he came work with me was math on the back of a napkin. And I think he
Really?
actually kept the napkin. We went to lunch one day. He was at a different firm, and they were making him up, proposals for his becoming partner and how much he would
Hmm.
make and everything else and how much he was bringing to the firm. And did some quick back of the napkin math, literally on a table at lunch, and sold him on the idea that he'd be much better off opening his own practice and building a business. And here we are, many years later, and he's very, very successful. So
Yes.
math drove the start of our partnership and the way our firm works. And one thing we've always looked at and did a little differently, I think, than most people is
Hmm.
we're kind of a business first, law firm second type of mentality.
Right.
We run things. We think in terms of a marketing department. We think in terms of sales. We think in terms of financials and managing those financials. Everything starts with business core decisions, and I think it goes back to I have a business background in
Yeah.
finance and economics. I always thought that way. I've always been a frustrated entrepreneur who ended up opening a business that sells legal services. So I never really wanted to be a lawyer. And actually, in undergraduate, I'd done the finance and economics, and
Yeah.
my advisor at the time, I'm like, look, I'm gonna go get an MBA, and he's like, why are you doing that? He goes, it's really kind of an overview of everything you just did. Why don't you go to
Right.
law school? It'd be a good combination. I'm like, I don't want to be a damn lawyer. Are you kidding me? Went to law school kind of on a whim, to kind of
Yeah.
just learn it. The first year in law school, I was day trading. I was writing my own day trading software. I had like
No
three
kidding.
computers running at all times. So I didn't really pay attention all that well. And then Alan Greenspan, that was the irrational exuberance period in time, like in 99, 2000,
There we go.
cut interest rates in the middle of a period with so the Federal Reserve meets in sequence, and that's where they adjust
Yeah.
interest rates. Well, he adjusted interest rates in the middle of nowhere. Market kind of tumbled. I was extended, got slapped, and got humbled really, really well day trading. And the next day, I remember going back to class saying, okay, I may have to make this law thing work. So the math that I didn't do and the risk I did not calculate actually led me more to practicing law, because I wasn't even planning on practicing law in law school. I was just doing it for education purposes.
That's a fascinating story, just because it's a quick demonstration of focusing on things that you can control overall. Like that, you couldn't control what Greenspan was going to do. Like
It
you
never
knew that.
happened before. It wasn't in my
Yeah.
math.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And you did the thing that you could do, which is, okay, I've got a career path that could potentially pay well, and there's entrepreneurial opportunity. Now, when you, speaking of that, when you were going through law school, was there already the thought of, maybe I can at least own my own law firm at some point?
That was always the idea. Yes.
Okay.
I was never, I'm not one, I'm not good at playing with others and other people's rules. I just,
I know the feeling.
I just have problems with authority, I guess.
Yeah.
So even as a young lawyer, I was in a law firm, and they made me managing partner within 3 or 4 years out of law school. Because I
Wow.
always wanted to do things my way. So they're like, he's either going to buck us or we can follow him a little bit, I guess. And for whatever it was worth, it worked for me. But I ran a business while I was in college. I was always
Yeah.
a serial entrepreneur. Even as a kid, going back to the baseball thing, I was the kid who had convinced the manager at KB Toy Store that when they got the baseball card packs in, to let me go through
Mhm.
them first. Because baseball cards back in the day, they used to have something called a rack pack. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
There's like 3 stacks of cards. They're in cellophane, so you could see the top card and the back card and all 3 stacks. Well, my 11-year-old brain had figured out that they were packing them in sequence. So if I knew there was a good rookie card, and then one card was on top and the other card was on the bottom, the same order, if I can go pick through the packets and find those, I paid $4 for the pack and had a $15 card in it. So I was the guy. That was my first business as a kid.
Wow.
So I was arbitraging baseball
Wow.
cards.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that is exceptional.
Yeah.
But that also speaks to something that I think is a superpower, especially among entrepreneurs, which is pattern recognition.
Everything's pattern recognition. Everything we do is
Yes.
pattern recognition. And
Yeah,
that's what numbers are, patterns.
that's right. That's right. They do tell. There's the old idea, right? The numbers will tell you a story, and they really do. And
Yes.
it's interesting to see the joy when a firm owner realizes how fun the story can be,
Yeah.
even when it's leading towards, oh my gosh, I'm recognizing an upcoming deficit in what the firm is going to produce versus what I need to keep running it. But they realize they're seeing it 6 months out all of a
Well,
sudden.
absolutely. It almost takes the pressure off of you as a firm operator from having to make decisions, in the sense
Yeah.
that I don't have to be clairvoyant. I don't have to have a crystal ball. I don't have to kind of make it up the stuff on the fly. I can just look at my data and where's my data going to lead me? The data is
Yeah.
going to tell you what to do. It'll take some of that pressure off of the decision making and usually lead you to a much better decision most of the time. So,
Yeah.
I hate to beat a dead horse, but yes, the data makes everything so much easier. If we didn't have an aversion to it as lawyers, we would do so much better. We'd be a lot less stressed out.
Now, the data will come into conflict with emotions, right? Because
Absolutely. All the time.
let's say you have a team member, the classic example, a team member can't meet their KPIs. What do you do in that moment? How do you all handle that?
You have to have formulas and you have to decide that before it becomes an issue. So, if you have an SOP and you have a formula that's laid out, maybe if they miss that KPI over 2 quarters or 2 periods, whatever you're measuring, then there's
Right.
already a formula for what happens, and I credit you with this. You gave a talk at a GLM many years ago. It was the whole idea of I forgot how it was phrased, but kind of stepping up to different roles as a business organizer, being from the kind of the family, the head of the family to the captain of the ship, like that.
Yep.
And
leader, CEO. Yeah.
that talk. So, and you got to get past that point where, and I'm the worst one. I am the worst at this because I know everybody in my office. I know who their kids are. They come here. I play with their kids. I get, extremely close. So the hardest thing you have to do as a business owner is when you have to actually make that termination decision. So my mind is always, are we in a rehabilitate situation or are we in a replace situation? And when you get to that decision that you have to replace, hopefully you've laid the groundwork for that by having scorecards. You've had weekly or monthly or quarterly performance meetings. So people know when it's coming because the data is not there. And if you're a data first type of company, they know you're doing it for the best, the betterment of the ship. You can't sink the ship because of 1 or 2 people. You have to sometimes throw some people off. And, if you're doing it the right way and you have systems in place and people know you're looking at the data and they're being held accountable for certain data points, they know if they're not meeting their numbers that the next logical step is going to be, you're going to have to upgrade that position and put somebody in it. So it actually eases that tension of having to terminate people or move on. And it also makes it easier to kind of give people a goal to shoot at, employees, especially producers, your rock stars, they want numbers. They want systems. They want formulas. They want to fit within a framework of something. So giving them numbers and giving them targets to shoot at, they're going to perform even better most of the time. So that makes a lot of things a lot easier in your law firm.
Oh my gosh. So it's really hard when you realize that that's something you want to create as the leader of the law firm. You want to start setting a standard. You want the KPIs. You even believe in this idea. Like people are listening to you, Brad, going, I know that my A players would love to have a target to go at, but I'm so nervous that my C players are going to abandon ship. And I only have 7 team members and I think 3 are A and 4 are C players.
So the question for those C players in your mind is, can they become B plus or A players? If they can't, the people who got you to the point you're at may not be the people who get you past this point that you're at now. So unfortunately, and our firm has been there too. We've gone through a lot of people over the years. And as we grow, we have different requirements for different positions. And, you have to keep the ship sailing. You can't keep holes in it. And, the biggest thing is when you start seeing those things pop up in your data and you start seeing that as the problem points and you can't optimize those KPIs because you have a people problem, not a process problem. You're hurting everybody else in your firm. That's less money to go around for salaries. It's less money to go around for bonuses. That's less growth. Keep a picture of your kids on your desk. You're taking money out of their pocket every time you make the decision. Let somebody stick around that shouldn't. You have to, if you're going to be a leader and you're going to run a law firm, if you're not good at this, you have to hire somebody that can do it for you. But you have to be able to make those tough decisions.
That's right. Now,
and it makes them easy.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about to the Genesis Group recently was a different part of math, which is time math, measuring time. And I know you had big breakthroughs recently on your ability to free up your time. Talk to me about that.
So I went down this rabbit hole and I've always felt this way. I'm always extremely busy, and everybody suffers from this. We're busy, but not necessarily productive. Where's my time going? And, this thing, and it's always been a challenge for me on how to and we say time management. You really can't manage your technical time. You can only say no to things that you shouldn't be doing. So it's really a process of elimination as opposed to addition into it. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole of how do I stop doing potentially 50 to 60% of the things I'm doing now? How can they be done by someone else? Because, my time is best spent. And we've always done this exercise. What are the 4 or 5 things that you can do that has the best value or most value to moving your firm? The problem is we spend so little time doing those things. Going back to math, what percentage of our week are we spending on those things? So the rabbit hole I went down, and it was from Genesis, and everybody then speaking about, these virtual EAs, these getting a personal assistant and having them do things. And I was always worried, well, what am I going to have them do? Because I suffer from that. Nobody can do what I do, complex and, so I started.
No one can do your email the same way you can.
No,
right?
of course not. They can't hit the delete button with the efficiency that I do. Although I'm the worst at email. I hate email. I was the guy, before and after, good contrast. I had 15,000 things in my inbox. Now I live in a world where I have inbox 0 every day because we created formulas and systems for that. And how relieving that is. I hated email. I used to do a systematic purge every 3 months. Anything that was older than 3 months, I would delete, thinking if it was that important, they would email me again, and it would just get put back in the pile.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, but no, what I went to and what we talked about at Genesis and everything else is, I went through this process of analyzing my calendar, and started with the big rocks, the important things that I know I have to be doing that's important to my business. And time, it's a combination of time blocking and delegating. I started filling out my calendar, blocking those things out, and I started very systematically everything that could possibly be offloaded to somebody else, creating the system for that, creating the formula for that to let somebody do that thing for me. And at first, it may take me 10 minutes to write the instructions on how to do something. It would only take me 2 minutes to do that thing, but it's that future bank of time that I'm saving. If it's going to have to happen again, now we have a process and I've offloaded and it's off my plate. And I was successful in capturing over 70% of my week now that I completely own to do deep work and things like that. I will tell you that is the one thing that's really in the last year has propelled me even further faster, because now I've cut out all the distractions for the most part. It's a struggle every day, obviously. Yeah. And now I have a framework to work in, and I've offloaded so many things, and I'm able to focus on things. And look, it doesn't happen unless it gets on my calendar. So if somebody wants me to do something, a to-do list is bullshit. It never gets done. It becomes a not to-do list, basically. So, you have to have a better system. And finally, after many, many, many different iterations, many, many different tools and products and stuff like that, I finally found something that's working. Now, next week, I'll tweak it and maybe change something like I always do. But it's working for now.
You know what? Honestly, I think, Brad, that one of the keys to time management, productivity management, task management, especially for a busy entrepreneur, is adding some level of novelty to it on a regular basis. Because if you're not tinkering with it, you'll grow tired of it. You'll leave it by the wayside.
Yes. You got to scratch that itch for something new, and especially with time management. Like, people always ask me, what workout are you doing or diet you're doing? Well, it's going to be different next week because I need to change it. Because I have to scratch that itch for something new to kind of challenge myself. The same thing, what's working now is working much better than anything else I ever did before, but I'm not comfortable being comfortable. So I have to tinker a little bit with it and change it. So the only constant is change. And I'm embracing that. That's my mantra.
All right, there you go. And the team, as you said, is just loving that.
They love it.
So at this point, left behind. At this point, for your team, like when you're distributing tasks into the team, or projects probably is the better way to put it, when you're distributing projects into the team, what does that look like? Is it you've gone into your deep workspace and now you've got an idea of what you want to have accomplished, some strategic thoughts, and you drop them out? Or,
the thing I'm really bad at is half-baked ideas. And I've tried to get better, over the years of that, because I'll have an idea. Like this weekend, I completely reinvented the whole probate and estate practicing practice.
Oh, really?
I completely turned it on its head. And I come in Monday morning, which was, a couple days ago, and I got notes. I've run it through Chat GPT. I've built out all the ideas, and I'm ready to take on the world, obviously. And then, the questions come, well, Brad, what about this and that and that? It's like, you know what? Before I forget I told you anything, let me go back to the drawing board. Let me think about these things. I'm always excited about the next. I have shiny object syndrome really, really bad. And it's finishing those projects. So yes, I have to get really good at kind of like I like to do is I have ideas, and actually my EA did this for me, created a dashboard for me. So now I have this
Yeah.
place to park ideas so I don't lose them. With the idea that I have to go in there, and this is something I need to refine. I need to think it through a little bit more before I start launching off to the team emails at 2:30 in the morning, asking them to do X, Y, and Z kind of thing. So it's forcing me. I have to consciously slow myself down a little bit and think it through a little bit. And then usually what I'm doing is I'm meeting with the team, whatever person I'm delegating this stuff to or handing it off to, and I'm trying to get better at explaining the why. What's the big picture, as opposed to just saying do X, Y, and Z. No, I don't need people just to be robots. I'm hiring these people. They're very smart people. They're very bright people. I want their creative energy put into whatever I'm doing. And the best way a lot of times to do that is to tell them, look, this is the target I'm shooting for. This is the big idea of what I'm doing. Here are my initial thoughts of things from my experience that I think will work, or the rabbit holes we want to go down and explore. And then just kind of give it to them. Let them marinate on it and kind of put their own thing into it. Then come back to me and let's push it a little bit more. So I've gotten kind of good at handing off big ideas with a little bit more guidance. And then instead of me just trying to own them and run them myself, because at any given time, I'll have 20 different projects I want to work on. Right. And, I can't. I'm only one person, between the office, practicing law a little bit, a family, and then golf. I've gotten into golf in the last year.
Gotta golf. I mean, yeah.
There's so much data and numbers. It's insane, but I love it. Angles and trajectories and speeds. And even bought the things you put on the end of your golf clubs that tracks every shot that I'm making. So I don't have time to run my law firm right now. I have to model my golf swing and figure this stuff out. So I'm much more hands off right now.
Hey, you know what? It gives the team some time to accomplish some of those big ideas, right?
They like it when I'm away from the office. They love conferences. Get him the hell out of here and away from us for a few days so we can actually catch up.
What I appreciate, and I genuinely hope everyone rewinds this podcast by about 2.5 minutes when you start talking about the way that you hand off ideas to the team, because there is a level of maturity and wisdom behind what you just talked about, where it's introducing the big ideas, talking about the outcome, and using phrases like "in my experience," and not just saying "I am the law and therefore you will do it exactly this way." Was that a maturing process for you in leadership?
Absolutely. And I started seeing that, when I first started this, business and I'm doing this stuff, I was too hands-on, telling people specifically how to do it. Well, guess what? If people are just following instructions, they never level up themselves, and they don't problem solve, and they don't get into that mindset. So if you want employees who are going to help you move the needle, you got to give them some repetitions, some reps to get in there and practice, take some BP and figure it out sometimes themselves. Yes, they're going to struggle through. Sometimes they're going to bump their heads on things. Yeah. But that's part of the learning process. And the people I've done that with, those are my guys now and my people now who are on my leadership team. Those are the people who are actually making big contributions to me because they've had that opportunity to do things. There's a big difference between telling somebody how to do it and giving them what they need to go figure out how to do it, and then they can teach somebody else potentially. So it's a way of, uplifting your staff and making your team stronger.
Man, just so much power behind all of this. Really love everything you've had to share. Now, before I ask you the final question of the show, Brad, if people want to connect with you, learn more about you, follow you, et cetera, where should they go?
Well, our website for me is LouisianaSuccessionAttorney.com. I do probate and estate work, and then I'm really deep diving into LinkedIn per our last Genesis meeting. Yeah. So if you look for Brad P. Scott, the Probate Guy on LinkedIn, you can find me, because there is another Brad Scott in my market who has been picking up clients for me for a couple of years, because he's Brad. And my wisdom, I went Brad P. Scott instead of Brad Scott. But guess what? If you're going to refer somebody, you know what you're going to say? Call Brad Scott. So he's doing well.
You'll just have to make him an offer he can't refuse at some point. Very good. All right, last question for you. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
So I always have about 4 books going at a time because I can't sit still. So I have, book by my nightstand. I read at night. I have one in the office when I'm taking some downtime. And I at least have 2 audiobooks that I'm doing while I'm walking.
Oh, very good.
This year, I've been kind of going back to my library and rereading and re-listening to things. I mentioned last time I'm going through a lot of the Dan Kennedy books again.
Yeah.
The one on my nightstand right now, which, for me was one I read a long time ago that reset me. And it's something I think, anybody who's a busy entrepreneur needs to potentially read, is Living with the Monks by Jesse Eisler, I think it is.
Itzler. Yeah, I don't know either, but yes,
he
Jesse.
did this thing where he did a book, Living with the Navy SEALs, and it's like he just incorporates himself into their world and then writes about it. And he did one with Living with the Monks. And Jesse was a busy entrepreneur, had 101 things flying at him every single day, and he decided for 2 weeks to basically go live in a monastery. And he did what the monks did, put the phone away, all the distractions of life, and got away from everything. And for me, it's a book that kind of resets me that, hey, sometimes you have to step away. You have to have that silence, that solitude. And that's where the genius really kind of comes out. Some of the best thoughts and ideas I've had are my morning walks next to the lake where I'm by myself. Get the AirPods out, get the phone, leave it all in the car, and just be with your thoughts kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes from the book that I love is that he says something, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but some of the best conversations he had was with himself in silence. Just kind of getting there with your thoughts kind of thing. So I think it's a good book to reset you every once in a while, that you have to step away to do good work. Not just a vacation with the kids running all over the place and burying you in the sand or standing up on the Disney World. You have to have some think time and some space to be with your own thoughts and slow things down. Because the more you slow things down, the faster you can go.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books. I've read it probably twice now. This is going to be my 3rd read through.
All right. What are you watching and listening to?
So we're watching, and I'm not a big TV guy. So we're always watching series way out well after everybody knows what happened. House of Cards. So I know Frank's going to go down. I don't know who's going to take him out. So I don't know how it ends yet. So nobody ruined the ending for me. House of Cards, I'm enjoying that. Listening to, I'm kind of one of those guys, it depends on the time of the day. I'm really into Motown music right now for some reason. I'm going through that phase.
Oh, right. I lived outside Detroit for a while, so I love Motown.
Well, I went to Detroit for a conference, and we went to the whole Motown Museum and stuff like that. That kind of sparked my interest. And as a complete white boy, I cannot sing, dance, or play any instruments. And I can almost feel the music. I'm getting better.
I can almost feel the music. That'll be the quote. That's the poll quote on all of this. Well, Brad, my friend, I appreciate all of your wisdom, insight, energy. I'm so glad that you opened this with math, because that is just a delightful framework. I love math. I love statistics. I love the story of math so much. So a real treat to talk about that.
I love it. Thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.